Let's face it, we have all probably had the impulse to insult a random stranger with a username like alphamale85 under a YouTube video. It's normal. On the internet, every little disagreement diverges into fights and name calling. And if you have a username like that, you're kinda asking for it. However, if you don't think this urge to insult is particularly productive, you are in the right place. Today, we are talking about the hierarchy of disagreement, an idea by the famous investor Paul Graham. It's a simple way to tell terrible ways of debating, like name-calling, apart from good ways of debating, which we'll talk about more in a second. Hi everyone, I'm Luca and this is School of Thinking, the channel where you can find tools and ideas to help you think better. Let's go back to the basics, or rather, to the base. The lowest form of disagreement is name-calling. When we insult someone, we are not really adding anything of value to a discussion. And by offending the other person, they are more likely to get stuck in their ways. Not all insults are born the same, but in this situation, there isn't much difference between calling someone an idiot or an uncultured swine. They are both personal attacks. The first level of disagreement between two characters will consist of arguments like, "Shut up, you liberal! You know nothing about economics. Read an actual book, you fascist." The so-called ad hominem fallacy is when we steer away from the topic of discussion and decide to attack not our opponent's argument, but the opponent themselves. There's only a partial overlap between this and name-calling, since it might introduce new elements in the discussion that might be useful. For example, by saying, "Well, she's a lawyer, of course she's gonna defend her client," we are making a mistake, but we are also adding some new information to our reasoning. And we are also not totally wrong. Sort of. We often believe that a person's identity and their role have a huge influence in evaluating their positions. But according to this way of thinking, the same idea has different weight when said by a saint than when said by a criminal. This is understandable, but to evaluate ideas in a rational way, we should see them as if they were written on a piece of paper, and take them for what they are. The sentence, "It's not a crime to steal if you are hungry," can have a completely different meaning in our eyes if said by a poet like Bob Marley or by a criminal like Ted Bundy. But the truth of it has nothing to do with who said it. The focus of a disagreement should stay on the things that are being said, not by who's saying them. Let's see an example. You're just saying that because you have never worked a day in your life. You can't talk about economics without a green sociology. You are the CEO of a global conglomerate. Of course you are against minimum wage. You have never read a philosophy book in your life. How can you have opinions about philosophy? From this level on, according to Graham, we start to address the arguments and not the people expressing them. First step is disagreeing with someone because of their tone. It's ridiculous. Our manager rejected the project in such a pretentious way. You can't expect me to do the dishes when you're being so arrogant. This behavior is better than criticizing the other person, and even better than insulting them. But our critique is still not addressing the other's main point. And that's why it's still pretty low on the hierarchy. Obviously, a discussion that is rational and efficient is more likely to happen with a friendly tone rather than a condescending one. However, saying the most correct thing in the world with the nastiest tone ever doesn't make the thing false. It's important to distinguish between what's being said and how it's being said. You always sound like such a know-it-all when you talk about rich people exploiting the poor. Do you think you're better than them? When you say that everyone is responsible for their own success, you sound like such an arrogant privileged. This is the level when we start actually criticizing what the other person's saying, albeit at the most basic level. It's the level of the polite contrarian, when we counter an idea by simply saying it's false, or that the opposite is true. "Why are you saying my carbonara is horrible? It's so good!" It can make sense to object an idea by promoting another one. Only problem is, phrases like "you are wrong and I'm right because I said so" don't really further the discussion in any way. How can you say that rich people should pay more taxes? No one should pay taxes in the first place, because taxation is unjust and oppressive. No way, the capitalist system is the unjust and oppressive one. Counter-arguments are the first way of expressing disagreement that actually add value to the debate. However, there's always a risk that no matter how good our counter-arguments are, they might steer the discussion away by referencing something that has nothing to do with the core argument. For example, if I'm being criticized for being messy, I could respond, but I've gotten so much cleaner during the years. It might seem like a good counter-argument, but in reality, I'm not addressing the core argument. I can still be messy, even if I've gotten a lot better over time. My opponent and I are talking about different things. They are talking about how messy I am, while I'm talking about how much better I've gotten throughout the years. Let's have another example. Well, I disagree with Marx's philosophy you are telling me about. A lot of economists, even Marxist ones, have proven that he was wrong. This counter-argument is a problem because one is talking about Marx's philosophy, while the other is talking about Marx's economic theories. I don't think libertarian economics is right. Lots of sociologists have pointed out how liberal systems can create social problems and economic inequality. Again, one is talking about social problems, while the other is talking about economy. Finally, we made it to the end of our ladder. There isn't much to celebrate, to be honest. The more sophisticated our disagreement gets, the more energy we have to use to explain it, and the less people will use it. Our second to last step of the pyramid is refutation. It's based on quoting an explicit incorrect argument in our opponent's reasoning, and then finding its flaws. In order to give someone a refutation, we need to cite, not by memory, let's not be pedantic, a point in which they argued for something and then criticize that argument. A few moments ago, you criticized an idea I brought up from a libertarian economist. In response to this critique, I would like to say that at this point, you said that Marx's economics is incorrect. In response to this, I want to say that after that, there should be a good argument with the goal of countering that specific thing we are quoting from our adversary perspective. Unfortunately, instead of a good argument, people often use this way of disagreement to get back to the base of the pyramid. Something like, at this point, you said that Marx's economics is incorrect. In response to this, I want to say that you are a troglodyte. You know nothing about the subject. You haven't considered that it's actually correct. Here we are, finally, at the top of the pyramid. The best, most noble form of disagreeing. The one which will turn you into modern-day Socrates and future Einsteins. Is the refutation of the central point. This level focuses on the most important details, the most relevant ones to the discussion, ignoring less poignant ones. Given what you told me before, it's clear you see me as a messy person. But you're wrong, since my room is the cleanest of the entire house. It's important to point out that there's a huge difference between refuting the central point and refuting parts of the other person's ideas, choosing exactly to make my opponent look bad. One of the most successful rhetorical techniques, which aren't a form of disagreement, is pointing the attention away from the core debate and talking instead about less important issues with the sole purpose of making us win the argument. It's not necessary that the issue we are criticizing is quoted exactly, or that it is the single central point, but it has to be very relevant to the issue that's being discussed. A few moments ago, you criticized the core point of libertarian economics. In response to that, I like to say that that critique has already been dealt with by some contemporary economists, which prove it to be inconsistent with real-life experiments. Here you say Marx's philosophy is wrong. In regard to that, I want to say that, actually, while a lot of Marx's philosophy has been questioned by Marxists themselves, some of these theories have stood the test of time very well. Learning how to disagree is a useful skill, now more than ever, in a time of information overwhelm and a constant debate over every little thing. In summary, the 7 types of disagreement are name-calling, ad hominem, tone policing, contradiction, counter-argument, refutation, and refutation of the core argument. Armed with this knowledge, we can go back to our daily life with more mindfulness. Before that, don't forget to let us know in the comments your example of these types of disagreement. Just don't call each other names. That is all for today. We'll see you in the next video.